Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And in today's video, I wanted to give you guys my opinion of how I feel AT&T is positioned for the new 5G era that we are transitioning into. So, throughout the later parts of the LTE era, AT&T started shining because we started seeing them with the one-touch strategy implement the spectrum assets that they owned. They finally got all of the LTE carriers onto their cell sites. And then we also got an additional backhaul boost from AT&T as well. And it started showing that AT&T has been the fastest carrier in the United States for the last 2 years or so. Ookla started picking up on it first, but then also other third-party testing firms also confirmed that they started seeing, okay, on average, AT&T is starting to become the fastest carrier in the United States. Now, as you see by this article, which I will leave in the description down below, some are also now reporting that AT&T has become the fastest 5G carrier. Now, people have emailed me over the last few days asking how does that make sense, because AT&T really can't dedicate a chunk of spectrum for 5G because they don't have that additional asset. Right now, just like Verizon, they are using the DSS technology, which stands for dynamic spectrum sharing. So they're sharing a bandwidth slice between LTE and 5G, and I'm now hearing and seeing reports that the DSS technology performs 20% lesser versus the LTE experience. So people are like, well, how does this work? How is that even possible? And for now, I just think it's really a mix of a few things. I think a lot of people aren't on the 5G devices yet, so they're not really pulling from that bandwidth. And I think Rootmetrics is using 5G devices, and I think Ookla is using 5G devices as well. And then also, of course, it's crowdsourced based, so other people that are using 5G devices are pulling faster speeds because not a lot of people are on the 5G side yet. But I do think, in my personal opinion, I think AT&T is not very well positioned for 5G. And I think that could become a problem for them. And I think they are going to fall behind early on in the 5G race. Now, I know that AT&T is not as flexible because of the debt load that they have accumulated over the years. Yes, people have told me they have positive cash flow and all this other good stuff. But remember, to make larger purchases, to get into more debt, they need board approval. And they also need the investors to be on board. That has not been the case. How people have asked me, how did AT&T allow T-Mobile to have a whole 1,000 more megahertz of millimeter wave spectrum, which is going to play a part in 5G? Will it be grand scale? Likely not. But you will start seeing millimeter wave pop up at the shopping centers, the malls, the busy arenas, the downtown areas. You are going to start seeing that. And then you're going to start seeing that T-Mobile is going to flex their muscle because they have 1,000 more megahertz. How AT&T let that happen, that is, clearly unknown. But we can speculate that they were not able to outbid or spend larger chunks of money because of the debt load that they're in. They are not as flexible at this point in time for that reason. And I do think that's going to hinder them early in the C-band auction. That C-band auction is going to be very important for AT&T for the fact that T-Mobile already has higher band spectrum in larger chunks. Verizon is bringing the money bags. I've stated that before. I'm hearing it now more and more. Starting tomorrow is November 1. We're about a month and a few days out from the C-band auction. The reason it's going to get a bit scary for AT&T is because I don't know if they're going to be able to trim their debt load in a month. I don't think that's possible. So I think they're going to go into the auction with some money, but they're not going to be able to outbid Verizon for that first 100 megahertz. I truly don't believe that. I've been hearing it from some of the internal sources, some of the engineers. Verizon has their eyes set on that first 100 megahertz that's going to clear first. So there's a total of 280 megahertz of that spectrum available. The first 100 megahertz of that spectrum is set to clear within 12 months of the conclusion of the auction. Verizon is likely going to outbid everybody to get that first 100 megahertz. That leaves AT&T to bid for a chunk of 180 megahertz, which is solid, but it's going to put them behind. And another reason why I think AT&T may be behind on the 5G race, they have not included a densification process until as of late. So T-Mobile built their network on mid-band through the HSPA era because they had no low band, so they had no choice but to add densification into the network. So they have not yet on a larger scale rolled out the small cells and C-RAN, but their tower grid that they had to build is a pretty dense one. And then we all know starting in 2017, Verizon started ramping up the densification across the nation, and they have done so using macros. And now they have reverted to using the C-RAN small cell, and they're doing that in abundance as well. So they're already, both T-Mobile and Verizon are already far ahead in that department, and it's going to help them carry much higher spectrum. The issue with AT&T, they started this late as well. I recently listened into a interview with the CEO, John Stankey, and he did commit that they are including the densification into the network, and the AT&T engineers know that that is needed as well. But it's just a bit late, and they can't just start throwing the densification at the network. They have to still go through city approval, zoning. So there's still a time frame involved in adding densification into certain markets. Some markets, don't get me wrong, they've already partially taken care of that. Phoenix, Philadelphia, New York City. But still, if you compare just the raw tower grid of Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, AT&T is just behind. They started utilizing the C-RAN to fill density, but on pure macro grid, Verizon and T-Mobile are just ahead on the densification projects. So yes, AT&T, to finish off this year, next year, and then 2022, there's a lot of C-RAN coming. I've seen the 3-year plan, so there's a lot of C-RAN coming. I can't dispute that. There's a lot of that coming, but it's going to take some time to fully see that come to action. And then, we don't know how long it's really going to take for AT&T to get that second wave of spectrum cleared, the other 180 megahertz. They participated in CBRS, but I just feel like they didn't have enough money to outbid anybody in the auction. So there were some speculations that AT&T bidded to raise the pricing of the auction, but then there was also the speculation from analysts that AT&T wasn't as flexible and they just couldn't outbid anyone in any county for that spectrum. So they are, from what I'm hearing, a little better positioned now for C-band. They're selling off business units left and right. But again, like I said, I don't know how they can stabilize the debt load in just a short month. C-band is coming soon. I think Verizon is very well prepared right now. All of their moves have worked. The stocks are up. They had a good quarter. I don't think there's any concern from the investors. I think Verizon will have no problem going into debt. They have very great assets on wireless, and investors, and I'm sure everybody else is on board. Verizon has not spent huge amounts of money on any of the spectrum auctions in the past. WCS, AWS, 600 megahertz. Verizon did not hardly participate. They went after millimeter wave. They got CBRS. And now I think they're going to spend the most amount of money that they've ever spent on an auction. I think they're going to spend it at the C-band auction. I predict they go 25, 30 billion. If they have to, they might even go more. But I do think they really, really, really emphasize that they need that first 100 megahertz, because remember, T-Mobile already bought Sprint, so they already have those licensing and those larger channels available to them. So I'm sure Verizon doesn't want to give T-Mobile even more of a lead than they may already have. So yeah, I think although AT&T finished the LTE era with the fastest speeds, I think just that quickly they can drop to the third place in terms of network speed and network performance. I do think they still remain larger than T-Mobile in terms of network size. I don't think that will be an issue for them. They're still heavily involved in FirstNet. That's another thing. They have they're stretching themselves very thin. I think FirstNet takes priority. Then, of course, the consumer with incorporating millimeter wave as they have already. But again, they are still 1,000 megahertz behind T-Mobile and even more megahertz behind Verizon on millimeter wave. Remember, Verizon bought a huge chunk of millimeter wave. T-Mobile got a very solid chunk, and AT&T just really didn't go after that much millimeter wave spectrum. So let me know, again, this was a longer video, but let me know how you feel about this. Do you think AT&T is in trouble? Do you think they're fine? I really believe it's kind of a mixed bag. I do think that the debt load is an issue for them. It's not going to allow them to go into further debt. There's just no way. The board of directors, the investors are going to have a problem with that. I know that spectrum is a very important asset for further growth and to shine on the third party reports that are coming out. But I think AT&T will spend on C-band, but I think it's going to be conservative. And I think they're going to wait for that second 180 megahertz to clear to see how much they want to get from that. But I do can say confidently that Verizon will get the first 100 megahertz right off the bat, and they're going to start working very quickly to incorporate that into the network, which, like I said, they've already built the densification for it. So once they add that into the network with a solid backhaul boost, it's going to be they're gonna shoot back up in the speed and the performance of the network. They already have the size advantage now in coverage, but I think Verizon will come back very, very, very strong into this 5G era with a very high capacitive millimeter wave network, and then with the C-band, CBRS, and everything else, the macro grid is going to start shining again as well. So let me know what you think about that again in the comment section down below. I look forward to reading the comments. I know this video was a bit longer than I anticipated, but I just wanted to get everything out that I had on my mind. Just wanted to make some points, and I want to hear from you guys to see what you guys think about this. Again, if you have been on the channel or you're new to the channel and you haven't liked, shared, subscribed, make sure you do so. Also, hit the notification bell, select all so you are notified when all the content is uploaded. Also, follow all of the social media outlets that will be in the description down below. I do post the videos on the Twitter. I also am posting pictures of the N41 rollout in El Paso to kind of give you guys a feel of how fast it is going. So make sure you follow the social media outlets. Thanks again for watching. This is Tyrone with Tech Life, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.